If you live below the Mason-Dixon line, batter down the hatches. General Sherman is coming. And by General Sherman, I mean Acrocanthosaurus atokensis.
The terror of the South.
The terror of the South. Yes.
As we all know it.
Yes. His beloved nickname. We're talking about that animal today. Do we have things to plug? Presumably. We got a Patreon. We have an Etsy page. We've got a Redbubble. Go check them out. You know, everything supports the Skeleton Crew, supports us continuing to make these videos for everybody and making them as good as they can be, which is a statement that sounds very rich, given that we just went through 3 failed opening bits and some of the most stilted dialogue we've ever seen on this channel since we got comfortable on camera. But in any case, we have a good video for you tonight. I think I feel it in my bones. We'll see. It's a theropod, so we're at least motivated. Yeah.
Yes. Not some lame hadrosaur. Ha ha ha. We read your comments. I'm not sorry if my comments about Edmontosaurus upset you. If you watch the video, you'll see that I like it.
It's true.
I also really like Edmontosaurus. As unexcited as I was to record a whole video about it, you've seen the video, presumably. I did like it quite a lot.
But you also didn't record a whole video about it.
No, I didn't. I recorded half a video about it because I had to go talk to other people about dinosaurs that night. I have many plans upon plans.
Are they measured in centuries?
It seems that they are. I would have once thought they were measured in months, but given how long it's taken for me to publish anything I did as a graduate student, I think they are measured in centuries. Yes.
All plans are measured in centuries if you keep adding projects.
That's true. Okay. So anyway, this man, who, despite his best attempts, did not put up a manuscript this week, is Dr. James Napoli. And Dr. James Napoli is me. I'm a research instructor at Stony Brook University's Renaissance School of Medicine.
My name is Amelia Zietlow. I'm a PhD candidate at the American Museum of Natural History. I am also behind on many deadlines.
All right, there's no Scott.
There's no Scott today.
My name is Alex Rubenstahl, a PhD candidate at Yale University, and I was roughly on schedule with one of my deadlines until I now just added a new thing that I promised I could get done by next week, which is now going to set me back on my deadlines. Also, a proud Yank and resident of the North, i.e. the correct side.
Well, anyway, yes, Dalton I am. Dalton Meyer, in fact. A Yale PhD candidate from, well, you'd never guess at Yale University. I threw off my own rhythm very badly there. And in terms of the flow of time, I've resigned myself to just, you're aware of the meme of the skeleton sitting in the chair that's red? And it's like when you drink caffeine, but it just makes your heart race and it doesn't help anything. I've resigned myself. That is my life now. I don't know when I'll get off the chair, but I'm the skeleton in the chair.
I know.
And together, we're the skeleton in the chair crew.
I know, Wendell.
Don't say it. Don't think it. Don't say it.
Look
how empty.
He's empty now, but he'll be full of
all kinds of meats and cheeses later when he finds the welcome platter. When he blends it out into the hill.
That's great.
I forgot that my cloverleaf formation is the one that has just the pit they have to climb out of.
Right, because this is where Deinonychus was from.
Yes, but this was not because of Deinonychus. This is just a consequence of how I put this down. The Deinonychus pit is over there.
Oh, right. I see. The quarantine zone.
I'm going to find a better Acrocanthosaurus. I don't like the green one. I like these.
Those are nice. So yeah, who is this?
This is Acrocanthosaurus. Or is this not my turn?
No, it is. I'm sorry. I was starting a new bit, but it's your turn.
You want to do the bit?
No, it's okay. I'll do the bit later. There's plenty of time for bits.
Okay. This is Acrocanthosaurus atokensis. Acrocanthosaurus being high spine lizard, and atokensis being for the county it was named or found in.
Yes, Atoka County, right?
Yeah.
Which I don't know. I've never heard of that. No, yeah. I for some reason had never assumed it was a place name until I had to think about it for more than like a minute. I was like, what does Atokensis mean? Nothing. It must be a place.
Yeah.
It's got the ensis.
It's
True.
got the itis.
If I had used my Latin skills, but unfortunately I don't have any of those. I like how it sits down.
It does the good theropod sit.
It does. Yeah, it's a. I mean, we always kind of start with a little bit of comment on the design, and then at the end of the video, we remember to talk about the design. I will say, I like it. It feels plausible.
I like
but there
it.
are things I don't like about it. What'd you say?
I like it in spite of it being Acrocanthosaurus. Suppose like
Yes.
yeah, it's I'll save my thoughts for the end. For those three commenters who say that our videos are too long and they could really only be 10 minutes, and we don't talk about the designs. This is just for you.
Well, so Acrocanthosaurus is a dinosaur that's actually pretty near and dear to my heart because I, for the first 2 years of the Skeleton Crew, worked at a museum that prominently features an Acrocanthosaurus skeleton, one of several known, and I think the most complete. Certainly the most complete skull, and I presume the most complete individual.
It seems that way.
Yeah.
Is
From the
it,
documents.
is it the same skull as the one that we have a cast of in collections here?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
that one's
cast
just
was
like
made before it was
unprepped
fully
and-
prepped.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really
I
cool.
re-articulated that the cast because the actual bones are in our like a protective thingy. This is not well. I'm going to say it, folks. Folks, not many people are saying it. But the spine here too low, too little.
Yeah.
It is a little bit too low.
Ooh, I do like how its feet splay. Honestly, yeah, it is. It's not really being emphasized.
It's a weird,
no
like,
feature
it's
should be-
not a good Acrocanthosaurus design, even though it's a good design.
It's
Yeah.
a good allosaurus. It's like a good. It's
Yeah.
It's Ceraniops.
Yeah, there it
could
is. It's Taurovinator.
Could be.
It's Rapator.
Yes.
Rapator.
Wait, what's
A
Rapator
Rapator
again?
is.
Isn't that a...
I think it's a metatarsal, right?
Well,
Or
no, it's a
tibia?
metacarpal. It is a
Metacarpal.
single metacarpal,
I see.
which
Good
is
job.
apparently a megaraptoran, as if that's a thing you can know.
What?
Yes, it's a metacarpal one.
How is it
I'm sorry,
better?
I was thinking of a Tyrannotitan.
Oh,
I was thinking of
Which
Ceraniops,
is-
which is just a post-orbital, I think.
Oh, Tyrannotitans actually got dentaries.
Good
I
material.
didn't know that. Yeah, there's some material of Tyrannotitan. That's cool.
Now,
how
something
many
that
more Carnosaurs can
kind
you
of
name?
bouncing into this, something cool about Acrocanthosaurus is it's one of these Carcharodontosaurs for which there are good skeletal or skeletal, if you like saying words incorrectly, but in a fun way, has pretty good remains.
Yeah.
Probably one of the best up there with, we were talking about this earlier, Meraxes, but better than. And concavenator, which is probably the best, but is a slab and less big. So
Yeah. No, in terms of the large-bodied Carcharodontosaurs, the only thing that might be better are some of the mapusaurus individuals, but none of that's actually been published.
right, there's a lot of that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot, but I don't know if it's a lot in that, because my understanding is mapusaurus is interpreted as a bone bed. And so I don't know if it's that there are a lot of bones, but not a lot of any individual, or if they are like
Hard to tell.
complete skeletons. Well, I mean, it's never been published, and I've never been down there, so I don't really know.
Okay, but let's theorize with. Let's pontificate and spread disinformation.
Yes, let's.
But no, there are...
What I will say, though... Oh, sorry.
I was just going to
go
say,
ahead.
there are 4 like pretty good skeletons of Acrocanthosaurus. So they vary in completeness, but each one at least includes, some ribs, some vertebrae from different parts of the body. We've got all of the pelvis in aggregate. We've got a beautiful skull at the North Carolina one. And I think pretty much all of the really good ones are from Oklahoma.
I believe so. The North Carolina one is as well.
I just want to see, it's this SMU one. Where's that one from? That one's in
SMU
Texas.
would be SMU in Dallas, yeah.
Now, when I was a young,
But it was discovered in Texas, too.
Yes, it was discovered in Texas. But that doesn't surprise me because Oklahoma and Texas touch.
so when I was a young man, whenever I thought of Acrocanthosaurus, I would often think of it in association with Deinonychus.
Yes.
Dinosaurs. But I was young and foolish because, as we said, it's from Oklahoma, and I think it's actually a different age than Deinonychus, right? It's a little
Well, this depends on a couple of interpretations. So,
Please.
Dalton has made the Cloverleaf Formation,
Yes.
which is mostly known for exposures in like Wyoming and Montana. I think Cloverleaf may also be present in Utah, but I
Certain
don't
prison.
recall. You're certain?
I'm almost certain.
I think it is.
Yeah, I don't recall every state where the Cloverleaf is exposed, but the Cloverleaf Formation is definitely like more typical of the northern, like western states, western interior. The holotype and the first referred specimen of Acrocanthosaurus were actually found in the Antlers Formation, which is a more southern rock unit. I've never worked in the Antlers. I don't know it. Like, I don't know what it's like firsthand. What is interesting is the Antlers Formation does appear to have a very similar fauna to the Cloverleaf Formation.
Yeah.
And that's where you can find the game, right? I think you can
I'm sorry?
I think one of the locations where you dig this up in the game is the Antlers Formation, right?
Let me check.
Perhaps.
Yes, Antlers Formation. You were correct.
Freaking sweet.
Which is where it's from.
Right. Indeed. And so in the Antlers Formation, and this is something I'm going to just reference to make sure I'm right about all of this. So we have Tyrannosaurus.
Yeah.
Which is like very common, right? There's that, ornithischian dinosaur, perhaps a rhabdodontomorph, as we talked about a little bit in the Metaburosaurus video.
Yeah. Kind of a glaring omission from the game, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah, they could put I mean, you could just put a Metaburosaurus in there and be like, it's Tyrannosaurus.
Yeah, I mean, you could.
It doesn't have the
But
big
it is
fat
kind of a
tail, right?
shame. No, it doesn't have the big, tall tail. Not at all.
Speaking of tall,
Back to the spines. We're all over the place.
in addition to that,
Well, hold on one second. I'm just trying to check something.
Well, you're checking about antlers or Cloverleaf?
Both. I'm trying to see if the Tyrannosaurus species are supposed to be separated between the formations or not. Because there's two, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Okay, so Tyrannosaurus dacii is known from the Twin Mountains Formation.
Also where they found Acrocanthosaurus.
Right.
That's where the Texas one comes from, I believe.
Okay, so this could have been a contemporary of Dino.
Yes, well, they've also found it in the Cloverleaf Formation.
Oh.
Right.
Well, then young me was actually correct, and I was wrong to ever doubt myself.
You were. Yeah, so this whole, like, what's kind of interesting is you have this network of geological formations, right? You have the Twin Mountain Formation, you have the Antlers Formation, there's the, what's the other one? There's another. There's Cloverleaf, Antlers, Twin Mountains, and there's another that's escaping me.
It's not Cedar Mountain, right?
No.
That's older, right?
Yeah. Well, Cedar Mountain
it's a few different things. There's the Yellow
Cedar
Cavern,
Mountain's a lot of
right?
stuff, yeah. Cedar Mountain's older equivalent and probably younger.
Right, it's more extensive. I don't know.
There were... This is very...
Uh-oh, the dementia's getting him.
I'm gonna start I'm gonna start bobbing back and forth for 30 minutes while we play Union Dixie.
Well, come on. In his defense, he
Let's
did
play
say,
some music.
Let's play some music.
Let's play some music.
Yeah. All right. I can't remember what formation I think I'm thinking of.
Okay, so we'll just have it
it's part of it's the Trinity group. This is what I'm thinking of. They're all part of the Trinity group.
Like in the Matrix.
Or their equivalent. There's the
Catholicism.
Twin Mountains, and some others are part of the Trinity group, and then that's equivalent to the Antlers Formation and to the Cloverleaf Formation. And this was an overly long digression because I forgot something that I didn't actually forget. So, all of that stuff. What I think is kind of interesting is that it really does seem like all of these formations are recording essentially the same ecosystem to some degree. Like it's kind of like what we talked about with Alamosaurus, right? Where like Alamo Formation, Javelina Formation, like you're finding Alamosaurus all over the place. And it's also similar to what happens at the end of the Cretaceous, where like the Hell Creek, the Lance, the Scholar, the Frenchman, like all of these formations in the northern US and Canada are all kind of preserving the same animals.
The vibes are similar.
Right. I mean, my
You're
guess
sure?
would be that they're just like different rivers that are depositing sediment, so the formations look a little bit different, but it's the same kind of thing.
Yeah. Not unlike large sections of uninterrupted continental areas today, where there's like pretty similar species. Like the middle two-thirds of Africa, it's basically all the same fauna all the way down.
Right, exactly.
Especially megafauna.
Yeah, especially
Right.
with slight variation, which we're probably not capturing in the fossil record. Like, what is the
Smaller
difference?
things have smaller home ranges, and
Well, yeah, but even in big things, right?
Yeah.
Like we might be missing, like, the middle, the Edmontosaurus from like the middle of Canada versus one from like upper Montana. Maybe they had like a different blue stripe on their face that we'll never
Sure.
know. Like, that's the degree of difference. Where, as far as the fossil record goes, they're the same thing.
Right. And I mean, that's kind of interesting. I think like a lot of this area is not, these are not generally, I mean, Wyoming and Montana, sure, but Texas, Oklahoma, they're not really areas you normally think of for dinosaur fossils.
no.
And that's because after the time when these lived, something happened there.
What happened?
There was something there afterward that wasn't there before.
It was dry.
It was dry. Right, it was dry. And by it was dry, what Amelia means is that the Western Interior Seaway was not present yet.
Yeah.
Where'd it go?
Yet. I actually
Where'd it
forget
come
the
from?
mechanism for why it...
I thought it was. Isn't it like craton subsidence?
I think so, but I also think there was supposed to be a high stand of like global ocean levels.
It was like stupidly hot, right?
It's very hot.
Yeah, but I mean, there wouldn't have been polar ice caps no matter what. I don't know. I mean, I guess it must be just subsidence, right?
Yeah, it may be seen, according to Wikipedia at least, as a downwarping of the continental crust ahead of the growing laramide rocky mountain chain.
Oh,
So
right.
as-
No, that makes sense.
As the
Okay.
laramide orogeny is happening and mountains are building in the far American West of what will now be not even the Rockies so much as like the Sierra Nevadas, the plate is starting to go under and it's getting pulled and it's subsiding the middle of the continent down.
Right.
How old are these things?
They're like,
They are Aptian.
I see. Yeah, so they're right before. It's
Yeah,
the
right
seaway
before.
is still restricted to north. I
right.
pulled up the map, so
And I don't know why it forms in the north first, because as far as I know, there's no active mountain building there. But it
Could that be
seems
a high stand?
it's where it hangs out too in the Maastrichtian. It's only present farther north.
Well, I guess that's old. Like, I mean, the like the continental material that becomes like, northern Canada and the upper Midwest is like really old. Like, it's old continental craton stuff.
I think it's
Yeah.
Proterozoic.
A lot
Also,
of it's
I-
Proterozoic, yeah.
I mentally flip-flopped what I said earlier with the Sierra. I meant to say Rockies, not Sierras, and I think I said Sierras, not Rockies.
Yeah,
Look at this
you-
guy.
I think
It's
you
the
did.
Rockies, and I'm from there. This is a big boo-boo error on my part, but it's
This guy's a friggin' Democrat. He's flip flopping.
because I'm mentally unwell.
Yeah. So no, that makes sense, right? Because I mean, and Dalton, I think you explained this well, but I realize our viewers may not even be aware of this. Like the crust will flex,
Yeah,
right? So if you pile up a lot of crust and rock in one area to make mountains, it'll actually deflect down the crust on both sides of it. But on one side, it's ocean already. But on the inside, you lower it down, and then I guess if now you've got a dip, and then the seawater can start to fill it up. Buys the dip, as they say.
Now I have
Very
a question.
confidently explained that mountain building definitely doesn't pile up rocks.
I don't know if we want to keep that explanation because there's the other part. Aren't mountains more buoyant, like crustally buoyant,
Yeah,
because they're more granitic, and so they pull up?
Crust.
I mean, they are more buoyant, but the added mass also, I think, causes.
No, it does. Yeah,
Yeah, it depresses.
Yeah, no, isn't it both that it is like it is the entire bedrock deforming from the weight, but then also local buoyancy of the mountain?
probably. Maybe we.
Yeah, there are also like accessory melts and stuff that'll come from that. There's like a million things.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
very complex. problem.
Okay, I'm gonna
Have fun, Editors.
re-explain this. I'm gonna re-explain this very quickly.
I'm just gonna find like a handy image of the Sierra Nevada orogeny too.
Nope,
Just
not laramide orogeny.
No.
I've tainted the well.
This video is a disaster. So when mountains are built for many reasons, and we're not going to get into the mechanics of mountain building here because that's an entirely other topic, but you will get deflection of continental crust around them. And so you will wind up with basins that are associated with in close proximity to the mountains themselves.
Mhm.
And in this case, what's filling the basin is water from the Western Interior Seaway, and that's why Amelia has all these nice mosasaurs to work on, because you get a shallow sea over there. What can also often fill these spaces is sediment, and sedimentary basins like this are where you find fossils. Just overwhelmingly.
Yeah, and
Right.
it does seem that from my cursory glances, and granted, this comes from reading the Acrocanthosaurus description, which was written in the 50s, and it even comments that like the geology is not completely like sorted, and I'm sure it has been since then, but I haven't read all the papers. But it seems that the units that we're finding Acrocanthosaurus in are they're not oceanic deposits, but they are probably near shore, or at least like a low stand where it's getting debris from the developing Rocky Mountains, from that laramide orogeny. Like the mountains are getting pushed up, and in that process, they are eroding sediment that is getting pumped into these basins. This basin will eventually be filled by the seaway, but right now it's just being filled with dirt that happens to have some Acrocanthosauruses in it sometimes when they die.
Right. If you're ever wondering why there's not like dinosaur fossils in the part of the world that you're from, it's usually just that there was not tectonic activity at the right time that could develop a sedimentary basin on land. Or it was not like, if you're wondering about any fossils, usually it's that it wasn't covered by shallow like ocean.
Right.
There was an interesting paper that came out recently that was called "All the Earth Will Not Remember," or something that to that
Yes.
effect.
Yeah, that
Really
was
cool paper.
led by I think Isaac Crone, who's a veteran volunteer for the Carthage Paleo
Oh,
Digs.
cool.
I didn't know that, and yes, it was. It's a very interesting paper because there are not a lot of active sedimentary basins right now. And the point of the paper is essentially, what ecosystems will we actually preserve from the Holocene, like long term? The answer is
Shallow seas.
well, shallow seas, yes, but the answer terrestrially is basically like Africa
Cool.
and parts
Rift
of
Lakes?
Asia. Well, like the Rift Lakes are going to preserve, but there's like a lot of low-lying area that like is sedimentary basin. Basically
Mississippi
nothing in
River
Europe
Delta.
and Mississippi River Delta, parts of the basin and range. Like
The
you'll
basins?
get like the basins, not the ranges. And like Patagonia and like parts of Central Asia, mostly due to the Himalayas causing the formation of new basins.
Sure.
But right, the idea is if the animal doesn't live there, you aren't going to find it, which is interesting.
I'm sure
I mean,
that has no
it's-
implications for our understanding.
No. This is also, I mean, frustratingly, this is why like there's next to no dinosaur material from the east coast of the U.S.
Well, segue.
I know.
Oh,
Masterfully done.
Gee, I've been trying to get to that segue for like 25 minutes.
well, first we had to be wrong about geology a lot.
Oh yes, of course. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Take my degree, put it in the shredder.
So
Embarrassing.
anyway, yes.
I can't-
So
you can't
so
be wrong
speaking of
about
the
anything.
speaking of the east of like the eastern U.S.
Yes,
Alex,
that's
would you
where
like
we
to
all
take it
are.
away? Yes.
God's chosen country. Is Acrocanthosaurus known from the East Coast? Maybe.
Probably.
So earlier, well,
Probably.
probably Acrocanthosaurus is known from the
That was
East Coast.
resonant. That was really good.
I'm glad you liked it.
Beatbox.
So as we talked about earlier, Acrocanthosaurus appears to be from the Aptian and on the East Coast of these United States of America. There are a few dinosaur-bearing fossil units, or at least things that were put down while dinosaurs were around. So there's some Triassic stuff and Jurassic stuff in the Connecticut River Valley. This is where Ankylosaurus is from, things like the famous trackways, stuff like that. There is some late Cretaceous stuff in New Jersey, Hadrosaurus and Dryptosaurus, and in the south as well. There's, I think, Maastrichtian and Campanian stuff too. So it's not completely fossil poor. They're not as nice as the ones out west generally. That being said, you do sometimes get beautiful articulated skeletons. For example, Dromaeosuchus, which was found in North Carolina, is a beautiful little stem croc. So it happens. Ankylosaurus is a very nice skeleton, such, which is in the early Jurassic. Anyway, one of these places is called the Arundel Clay, or the Arundel Formation, and this is in Maryland.
A Maryland, indeed.
Yes. If you went to the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History between, I want to say 2015 and now, and actually I think this little cabinet might still be up, the main dinosaur and fossil hall was closed, so you had the dinosaurs from the Early Cretaceous exhibit, and then tucked around the corner, this just little like section of the wall that was a bunch of fossils from this place in Maryland, kind of because it's DC, it's nearby, so it's more local. And this preserves what appears to be an Aptian environment, and there is a good mess of dinosaur fossils, and pterosaurs and sharks, and all sorts of. I think there are even like tree trunks and stuff. So we have what looks like a little habitat, and I think there's Tyrannosaurus or iguanodontian stuff from there. There's some ankylosaurs. Definitely like Astrodon, or what's being called Astrodon, some sauropods, what looked like little dromaeosaur teeth I remember seeing, and then what has been referred to as Acrocanthosaurus. And that's teeth as well as a skeletal. I'm sticking with skeletal, as well as skeletal remains, which suggests, as kind of Jimbo was alluding to earlier, that not only are the faunas like from Utah to Oklahoma pretty similar in the early Cretaceous, it looks like basically coast to coast comparable. And that was probably true for, dorsiventrally as well. The
dorsiventral axis of North America, yes.
America's dorsiventrally tall in left lateral view. I have been writing a lot of descriptive anatomy recently, so thinking of things in any other context is impossible. Which is cool. It's interesting. Recently, so the Arundel is actually, so more material, there's more possible Acrocanthosaur material, including possibly a small juvenile / subadult. There is, or was, what was suggested to be an ornithomimosaur from the clay, which was recently redescribed by Matt Carano, the director, I think the director of paleontology at the Smithsonian, or is curator?
Curator of dinosaur paleontology.
Curator of dinosaur, yes. Curator of dinosaur paleontology. Super cool, nice guy. Grew up in Connecticut, like me. So, stamp of goodness.
Right, went to Brown, like me.
That's a mark against him, but
has nothing in common with me.
No.
No. I've never met him. No, I've met him once.
So he was around all the time because he and Jim, I'd see him. Lovely families. Anyway, but he recently redescribed some material that had been suggested to be and described in the past as possibly a early ornithomimosaur. And he noted that a lot of the characters weren't particularly robust in this material and actually were pretty general for most theropods, as well as some specific characters, I think, if I recall, in the pedal unguals, so those are the claws on the toes, that were more consistent with Acrocanthosaurus and large Carcharodontosaurs. And so he makes, I think, a pretty compelling case in his description that a lot of that material, if not all of it, is just a mid-sized Acrocanthosaur ape of some kind, whether it's the same species.
It shows an autapomorphy of Acrocanthosaurus.
Yes.
and if I'm recalling this correctly, I can't access the paper right now, and so I'm remembering this from a talk. But if you look at the femur and dorsal view, the femoral head narrows as you move toward the end of the head. So the part that's actually articulating with the hip, it's normally either widening or straight, and in Acrocanthosaurus it gets narrower. That is an autapomorphy of Acrocanthosaurus, and so as we currently know, that would be the most specific level we could assign it to. It's possible we'll discover other things that share that, but given that it's the right time, right continent, and has an autapomorphy, I'd be pretty confident that it's Acrocanthosaurus, if not Acrocanthosaurus saitokensis.
This came out. Yeah, hold on. I'm just
the autapomorphy is that the femoral head is pointed in dorsal view.
Right, that's what I meant by saying it was narrowing. But yeah.
Subadult, they say, not juvenile.
Yeah, they say subadult, but that term is meaningless.
It's just smaller than the biggest ones we have.
As Matt says and I downloaded it. I'll share it in the chat. Although Acrocanthosaurus is a wide-ranging apex predator of its time, the available materials are too few and too incomplete to permit assessing whether they all pertain to a single species. This, viewers, is a good practice.
Yes.
If you don't have a tap, don't just be like, it's like this. It has this autapomorphy, but we can't be confident it's the same species. This prevents people in the future getting confused or doing work that, perhaps won't bear out if there's a major taxonomic reassessment of something.
Yeah. You can just say it.
Anyway, so I think that's cool. And actually I think this material had kind of been known and this has been discussed for a while, but this paper is the first definitive record of Acrocanthosaurus from here. So I think this was last year when it actually, I think it was kind of known, and then this was the publication of that work.
Well, it wasn't that widely known. Like, I remember Matt Carano presented this at SVP in Cincinnati. So
okay,
that
I
was,
knew about it. So
it's widely known. I see.
Well, I feel like it had been talked about before because I seem to recall growing up, like as a kid, hearing about like East Coast Acrocanthosaurus. I could just be conflated.
I think that's from the teeth.
That's from teeth.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, because Well, one thing that Alex, like when Alex was talking about the faunal inventory of what happens on the East Coast, one thing that is, I think, important to mention is that we don't really have depositional basins in the Cretaceous in the East Coast. So like the Triassic, Jurassic stuff is mostly depositing in rift basins, right? So like if you've ever been in Connecticut or Massachusetts, you will have at some point maybe driven through the, I'm not sorry. They're lovely places.
I like these places.
Yeah. But there's large rift valleys, right? We've talked about this before, like all of these big basalt outcrops, like these kind of rectangular massive mountains that form along the East Coast. These are all like a part of the rock that develops when you're breaking continents apart. And as part of that, you get a bunch of these downdropped rift basins that don't ultimately all wind up actually being the line at which the continents divide. This is similar to what's happening in East Africa right now. So like Africa is going to split in two. And there's not just one seam that it's opening at. As the area is breaking apart, there's down dropping all along the rift line until eventually some of these rifts will connect. What?
I can't.
What?
No, I thought of something so stupid.
Oh boy.
Just the last defiant British colonialist is in the mantle saying, I'm redrawing the lines in Africa one last time.
That is pretty stupid, but that is funny.
Shall be rent asunder.
Also, I sent the paper in the Discord. If you could,
I see, and I appreciate that very much. So, anyway, that's happening in like the Triassic, Jurassic, in North America. And that's why the stuff from that time period, which is still rare because there's not a lot of exposure of the rock, but like that Dromaeosuchus specimen that's beautifully preserved and articulated, like that's a basin where you can deposit something really nice, generally. When you get into the Cretaceous, there's not active mountain building or rifting in eastern North America. And so what you're mostly getting from Mesozoic stuff is coastal deposits. Like you're getting like the basically just like on the beach. And so normally, Right. Normally, this is associated with not so good fossil material. You don't tend to get really good deposition of terrestrial material on coastlines.
James, would you say
yes.
that there's good and then also not so good?
There's good and there's not good, and coastal deposition is not good.
And based on the average age of our audience, we can say you made that joke up.
We did, yes. I invented this line. And so what we're seeing mostly are teeth on the East Coast. Like it's actually not tremendously uncommon to go looking for fossil material in these rock units and find like dinosaur teeth. It's not everywhere, but teeth are what we're mostly basing the faunal assessment on. And so we say like Deinonychus is present. What we're saying is we're finding dromaeosaur teeth that look like Deinonychus teeth. And that was previously, I mean, it could be. It might be. Who knows, right?
It could be Deinonychus.
It could be Deinonychus spa. It could be a different genus. We don't really know, but it looks like Deinonychus. And that's what the case was with Acrocanthosaurus for a while, too.
I see.
And so there were big theropod teeth that people were like, well, that looks a lot like Acrocanthosaurus, and it's about the right age. And that is also why the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences labels their Acrocanthosaurus display as the terror of the South. Because that specimen, the museum acquired it from the Black Hills Institute, which I know there's a fairly complicated story about land ownership rights and everything, as there all too frequently is with who discovered the fossils and who had the rights to dig them up and everything. But ultimately, Black Hills wound up discovering the Acrocanthosaurus specimen, preparing it. If you've seen an Acrocanthosaurus in a museum, you've probably seen a cast of this specimen because the Black Hills Institute can still sell casts of it. So, like, what would it cost me? New Patreon benefit is you buy James an Acrocanthosaurus.
Wow, what a benefit!
It's a great benefit for me.
Display replica. It's quite cheap actually.
Oh yeah,
only a meager $172,000.
Okay,
how much could it cost, Michael? $10?
I remember. I feel like I looked this up when I was in middle school, and it was like 30 grand. Inflation has come for us all.
Well, the skull. It's just the skull is 13,800.
That's
better. The whole skeleton is only
$100.
The whole skeleton is 100 and almost 200.
Do they pay for the installation?
I think they buy an armature for it. I think they ship it to you, and they'll
probably install it.
Yeah,
I guess.
Cool. Hey, you guys want to? I mean, between all of us. No, that's
between all of us. I don't think we have $200,000.
No.
Between all of us, we could get 14 grand together for the skull, though. The idea behind the exhibit, and this was built well before I was there, and when long before Lindsay Zano was there. I think Dale Russell was still the curator at North Carolina Museum at the time. I think this may have been one of his last things that he did during his career. Because, everybody forgets Dale Russell, I think, was born in North Carolina, and after doing his whole career in Canada, got the position at the North Carolina Museum and went back there and worked there for a while. I didn't know that. Yeah. No, there's video of him in one of the halls. I say as if you were there. I keep forgetting you were never in North Carolina with me, Dalton.
No. I also, when you said that there's video of him, it almost sounded like Bigfoot footage. Like, we have video evidence of Dale Russell's existence.
There's a thing about him talking about like Pleistocene ecosystems in North Carolina. It's cool.
From that weird part of history where that they had like movie cameras, but you're still surprised to like find out that there's like video footage of them, like Teddy Roosevelt. Right. I'm like, that makes sense.
Right. Anyway, this was the long lost days of like 1998 or whatever. But
back when cameras were real crude, 1998.
But Acrocanthosaurus was installed, and the exhibit was built around the idea that this was basically the only large theropod dinosaur that we have any evidence of living in the American South, because teeth attributed to Acrocanthosaurus have been found in North Carolina. Again, do we really know much about the exact identity of the animal that left those teeth? Not really, but it's possible.
It was probably something like Acrocanthosaurus.
It was probably something very like Acrocanthosaurus, right? And so they call it, the exhibit is called The Terror of the South. And I remember assimilating just great as a New Yorker who moved down to North Carolina, because my first thought was to ask, do we have a nickname for the specimen? And they said, yes, it's Fran. And I was like, should have been Sherman, which I think would be a lot better, personally. But also it's the North Carolina State Museum of Natural Sciences, and I imagine they're not keen to name the dinosaur after the man who burned down most of Raleigh. Actually, what's interesting is Raleigh apparently was largely unburned because there was nothing there, and nothing continues to be there.
Sherman saw it and he said, "Did I already do this one?"
Yeah, oh, yeah.
He had his honeymoon there.
Oh, oof! I know what Dalton's referencing,
Yeah.
but the act Sherman committed was moral and good.
Yes.
Yes. But yeah, so that's the Terror of the South. It's a cool display. It's in like a turret in the museum, which I like a lot.
Cool.
It's got a lot of natural light. It gets very warm in there.
I sent some pictures of it.
Is that the one where like the Brachiosaurus or the sauropod is like coming out of the wall, sort of?
Yes, and it's also that's Astrodon, I think.
Okay. I said the sauropod. I realized.
I'd like to
after
see this museum.
It's a pretty cool museum.
I was going to say come visit me, but that's not where
yourself.
me is anymore.
So, two things have come up in this discussion that I think tie into some other purported Acrocanthosaurus material that's worth discussing, if only briefly.
Good segue.
Which is remains that can't be confidently attributed to Acrocanthosaurus and autapomorphies in the feet, and discussing the pedalungules, which won't come into play except to say that I'm talking about trackways. So feet made them.
Oh yes.
Which is that there is the famous, it's called Dinosaur Valley State Park. It's in Glen Rose, Texas. And it's in the Paluxy River. There is a pretty famous trackway of dinosaurs, which includes some sauropods and some decently large theropod tracks. Now, these are in the Glen Rose Formation, which is the same age, roughly. It's Aptian, at least. So in the ballpark of the rocks that have preserved known Acrocanthosaurus material. And it's a cool trackway. There's multiple sets of theropods, multiple sets of sauropods. And like many trackways, there's lots of ways you can interpret that. So there is kind of a classical story that you will hear presented that this is a predation attempt. And some people have invoked, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, in the theropod tracks, there is one set where a step is missing. And the idea was like, oh, maybe it was kind of hanging on to the sauropod, like latched on, trying to predate it, and so it missed a step. You know, maybe. But there's a number of other potential reasons why we don't have that. Maybe sediment filled in that one. There's maybe it just kind of like hopped. Probably not, because it's pretty big. But
here comes the fun, please.
I mean, it could happen, but it's there's no guarantee that these tracks were laid down at the same time. Not to say that like millions of years had passed, but even 1 year could have passed between when one set of tracks was laid down and the other. We know that the theropod tracks cross-cut into the sauropod tracks. So we know that the sauropod had walked, and then a theropod walked into that footprint. And so some people have thought, oh, maybe they're stalking them or chasing them. Maybe. Who knows? Maybe there was more than one individual. Maybe it was single individuals walking through the same area in different years. It's hard to say, and I don't think there's direct harm in really favoring one interpretation over the other, so long as you are explicit about the ambiguities there of here's what could have happened, we don't know, but it's at least consistent with the evidence. And you will also often see these tracks referred to. This is Acrocanthosaurus. And again, I don't think there's any harm in imagining Acrocanthosaurus making these tracks. Or even just an animal like Acrocanthosaurus, because it probably was around the same size. And given the time, it may have been Acrocanthosaurus. It may have been a close relative. Who knows? Again, it's consistent with potentially being Acrocanthosaurus, but there's nothing in the footprints that say certainly Acrocanthosaurus made these tracks.
It's actually written on the impression at the bottom of the footprint.
On the underside.
Like Andy.
Yeah. But it's backwards, or one of the letters is backwards.
Is this the slab that's at the AMNH, right?
It is.
Yeah.
It is. That's a plaster cast of the actual trackway, but yeah.
The one in the ground I thought was real.
No, they're both reproductions.
Footprints up on the wall.
Yes, no, they're both reproductions.
That Acrocanthosaurus trackway is not even the most controversial footprint from the Paluxy area.
It's the same trackway, in fact.
Yeah, which is we're referring to is that there is a often cited human footprint from that area that is often used by creationists, morons, and Joe Rogan type individuals as evidence of a cool thing that's happened. It's like, oh, dinosaur human coexistence. It's not.
It's not.
No.
It's not. There are a number of those of supposed human dinosaur trackways that are mixed together. The ones that aren't outright forgeries, which there are several, are often just weathered trackways. Because often they kind of weather into a single.
Well, like they're usually theropod trackways, right? Where you're kind of losing the lateral
theropods
digits.
are sometimes hadrosaurs.
Oh yeah, because
I don't know in that case.
The hoof.
Yeah, they're a little softer. Yes, which is funny because I think I was in back during the premiere days of internet, young Earth creationism, during the Bush administration, when the craziest and dumbest person I can imagine was a young Earth creation.
Right. Yeah. Isn't Kenthoven quaint now?
Which, holy shit! I mean, those people have just migrated into the new stupidity.
Oh yeah, of course.
Like 7 out of 10 of those people do think dinosaurs were real, and now we're courting new stupidity, which is that dinosaurs are fake and a government conspiracy. Good job. Thanks.
Great. Yep.
But yeah, I remember. I think I had heard about that track site first through like creationist stuff before like realizing that's where the Acrocanthosaurus was.
I knew about them separately, but I don't think I put together that they were the same trackway until I was in grad school. Like I knew there was like a dinosaur trackway in Texas that showed potentially a theropod trying to hunt a sauropod, and one with a potential human footprint. Potential, I say, as if I'm entertaining that possibility. But there's one thing I'd like to just add here, I think, because I think there's an important scientific concept in what Dalton said, which is that sometimes multiple things can be consistent with the evidence we have, and therefore we can't really test hypotheses after we get to that point. Right, because when you're doing science, and this is the thing I think a lot of people often don't really fully understand about the scientific process, you're trying to falsify a hypothesis. You're trying to show this guess isn't right. We generally accept that a guess is right because we keep failing to prove it wrong. But if you have a situation in which you say, okay, well, it's possible that the thing that made this track was biting onto the sauropod, or it's possible like it took an accidental step into like a section of hard sediment where it didn't leave a track for that one step. How would you test that hypothesis? You probably can't. And so at that point, we'd say we don't know. And I think it's good to be transparent about that sort of thing. It's something I hope we do on the Skeleton Crew a lot. I recall many times anecdotally we say we don't know. And
I think no, it's our.
We don't know anything. Right. Well, it's important because I think a lot of people imagine scientists as like they're just somehow divining the right answer.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's important to recognize we're mostly trying to prove ideas wrong, and then we kind of are left with the ideas that we didn't prove wrong. Yeah. That's the way it moves forward. Anyway.
It's important to think about not just for the Acrocanthosaur tracks, but for a lot of dinosaur tracks and other what are ichnofossils, right? Trace fossils. Unless there is really, really solid evidence tying it to one specific animal making the track, we can really make confident generalizations, and it's helpful, I think, when communicating with the public. So, like for example, the Eubrontes in Connecticut that are often referred to Dilophosaurus.
Yeah.
A Dilophosaurus-sized animal made those tracks, and it may have been related or may have looked somewhat like Dilophosaurus. We don't really know. But when communicating to the public, it is useful to tie into a body fossil. It is useful to be able to say, it's like this. But I do think that it would behoove us to start being a bit more transparent about an animal like Acrocanthosaurus made these tracks. Acrocanthosaurus did not necessarily make these tracks. Maybe it did. I would say, given the gulfs of time, probably at least Acrocanthosaurus atokensis did not. Would be my bet, but we don't know.
I like to do this also when I'm talking about Dalton, are you familiar with the concept of
Evolution.
So, for example, when I'm talking about Tiktaalik with the general public, what I like to do is say, and so I'll explain the features, and then like an animal, a lot like Tiktaalik is what gave rise to living tetrapods, right? Because I can't prove to you that Tiktaalik is the direct ancestor of tetrapods. Actually, I can pretty confidently demonstrate that it's probably not, based on other fossils that are older than it. But we know from its morphology and from phylogenetic analyses that it's really close to that origin and is primitive and derived in some features and other features in interesting ways. So it's like, hey, this is like what the ancestor of tetrapods was looking like. This guy's just kind of hung out for like a little bit longer than some of his relatives, being chilling. But something like this is what evolved. And same thing with the origin of birds. Something a lot like Archaeopteryx is what's giving rise to modern birds. Probably not literally Archaeopteryx, even though could be. I just there's literally no way for me to demonstrate that.
Mm-hmm. Right. Demonstrating a line of descent at any point, it would be impossible without genetic evidence, really. Like, you can't prove something is a direct ancestor, because down to like a specific level, like I'm not even talking about species to species. You can't really prove that either. But like, often with dinosaurs, we have individual to individual, or for like Tiktaalik, like there's not a lot of Tiktaaliks known. I think there are more than one specimen now, but there's a handful.
Yeah.
And so, like, to Alex's point, not only would we have to say the species Tiktaalik was ancestral to all things with legs, but functionally we'd have to say that individual Tiktaalik was the ancestor. Like, its kids did this, and we
don't know that.
We don't know that. We don't know if it had kids. I actually have it on good authority that it was that Tiktaalik was child-free.
R/child-free. Oh no. Last week only.
It was a dink.
It was It was
anyway.
DFNK, dual fission pod, no kids.
So if you're in science, that you use similar language to communicate to the public, to be transparent and honest about how science works and the limits of what we can know.
Yeah.
Yes, but also, I think also trying to not. I think a lot of people take that to mean like not being encouraging either, though, and like it's always possible to be encouraging and optimistic about what science can do while acknowledging lingering mysteries. I think framing them as like, here's the thing we don't know yet, especially for like young kids, is more exciting than being like, look, a fact.
Yes, you don't have to deliver this with like the barrel and the roof of your mouth. Where it's like,
I also think that there's probably some trepidation, and I understand this coming from, we don't want to project uncertainty because there's already enough public doubt in science as a process and an institution that like it seems perhaps backward to be like, here's something that we like don't really know, but here's what we understand and here are the possibilities. But I do think that actually laying it out can build more trust.
Yes.
Than just being like, oh yeah, this, these tracks are Acrocanthosaurus, or like, yeah, Tiktaalik evolved into tetrapods. I think if you have the time, which also, and we've decried this in a Q&A that will be out at some point, or maybe it was during the live stream, I don't remember, but I talked about how the kind of quick bite, very short attention span social media landscape is hurting science communication. And this is a part of it because you don't have time to explain nuance, which is also a reason why our videos are often so long. Yes, we are blowhards, and we like to hear ourselves talk, but also we do have some important things to say every now and then, including elaborating on these kind of nuanced topics. And if you have the capacity to do that, I think it can build trust in science because it's acknowledging, here's the evidence, here's what it's consistent with, here's what we can disprove, here's what we just don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
As opposed to just being like, and here's the amazing fact.
Yeah,
I mean, let alone that the amazing facts are usually so misleading in framing to sound amazing that like...
Right. Exactly. Well, yeah, I think that's the case in Dalton's favor, which is we've been doing the MDT approach, and people trust science less than ever.
So there's something I think we should science communicate about.
Is that the vertebrae?
It's about the vertebrae.
Before we move on from footprints, I want to say something that we didn't talk about because we got on to talking about The Simpsons and other things. I just wanted to mention it, like, to come back to like the uncertainty of what leaves trace fossils is the reason that trace fossils get their own name.
Yes.
Like why we refer to them as ichnotaxa and why we like call the footprints that are maybe possibly Dilophosaurus ubrontes. Because the only way to ever be certain that a track or other trace comes from an animal is if the animal that made it is associated with it. And it's either never happened or rarely happened that a vertebrate has done that. This is usually like with invertebrates. Like there's several fossils of horseshoe crabs that have little trackways that end with the horseshoe crab that made the track.
Pretty cool.
I don't know of any vertebrates for which we have something like that.
I'm not aware of that. I would love to see a dinosaur that's like mid-making a coprolite.
Just like
something like that, or like
foot just ripped off.
I don't know if it counts, but like the nests that the Pseudopodi are found on, if that would count as an ichnotaxon.
That is a debate. So
okay.
eggs,
I don't want to start a fight.
No. I mean, it's not a fight. There are camps that call eggs or like eggshell ichnotaxa. And there are others who say like they're tissues produced by the organism directly that are a part of its life cycle. And so they're just like fossils. Now, and the way that this kind of gone is we kind of treat it as both. The eggs get an ichnotaxon name, but I think there's an increasing push to try to associate these things to species as much as possible because theoretically there's information there that we can associate. Like, you know, there's no reason to say we couldn't have a phylogenetic character that's like, species lays eggs with this sort of microstructure in the eggshell. It's just
that
rare
context,
that we can do.
Though, could the nest itself be an ichnotaxa?
That's kind of what I was getting at. It was more so the nest, not actually the eggs. Like the eggs, I know are kind of a different thing. But I was thinking, like, if you find an animal on a nest mound, like presumably it's theoretically possible. Well, theoretically it's possible to find the nest either with just shells in it.
Yeah,
I mean, I guess
and that's usually what you find. Yeah,
I mean,
I've never heard of the nest itself getting a name.
Okay, interesting. Well, whatever. I mean, my broader point was I don't think we have vertebrates associated with trace fossils in the same way that we have a couple of invertebrates.
Not footprints or coprolites. The only ones are the couple of eggshells because, as I said, like eggs are considered trace fossils. Yeah.
Egg Mountain, if you do consider a nest a trace fossil, that's what I was thinking. But that's like the opposite of. So there's a cool name for the horseshoe crab ones, which is Morticnia, which is like ichnofossils is the trace and mort being death, so it's like a death trace. Which I guess kind of the opposite is happening in the Myosaurus. I mean, they died because they got fossilized, right? But it'd be like a birthicnia.
I like so viewer eggs. Eggs have a specific kind of ichnotaxa name, which I like because it sounds like you're just really excited about taxonomy when you say taxonomy.
Ooh.
But I'm thinking, kind of based on what Amelia said, I'm thinking about kind of the wider conversation about Acrocanthosaurus, which is like, even if you had a trackway where like let's say an Acrocanthosaurus was in a Looney Tunes type situation where it ran so fast and like tripped so severely that its metatarsal, its tib fib snaps in half. The rest of the animal goes sailing, but we have some of an Acrocanthosaurus preserved in the trackway. And like we have a few tracks, so we can like all right, this is the same one's behind it. Even then, like you can say that those trackways specifically were Acrocanthosaurus, but you can't like apply that more widely.
No,
because
I was gonna get to that, which with like the horseshoe crabs, where even if you have that track associated with that horseshoe crab, and you know that version of that track belongs to that species of horseshoe crab, you can't assume that all the other tracks that look like that belong to a horseshoe crab or that same horseshoe crab, because probably, but a lot of animals look very similar and probably leave similar tracks. Like theropods, all to my knowledge, except dromaeosaurs, are going to leave the three-toed. Right. But most of them are going to leave footprints that look the same. So it still doesn't help. It only helps you in that one scenario,
And,
which has yet to ever happen.
Hold on. I just thought of I'm going to pitch someone their future PhD project. I'm going to get the Romer Prize for this one, future student. Okay. Dinosaur footprints.
What are they?
Cool. You know what you sometimes get in them? Casts of the scales on the bottom of the feet.
True.
Ooh, yeah.
You should do look at find the 3 theropods we have where we have skin on the bottom of the feet associated, and see if we can get it like any narrower. Is the scalation on the bottom of the feet, can it do anything to improve our uncertainty?
Well, that would require an enormous survey of modern birds to see if there's any taxonomic variation in the...
Start with that.
No, don't start by looking at modern things. Don't ground truth your methods. Immediately apply them to the fossil record.
Get it twisted. Don't ground truth your methods.
And then just say, hey, isn't it weird that nothing in the modern sample does this? And then you can always just go, man, dinosaurs sure are weird.
So weird.
Wow, it's weird how
They're unique.
How prehistoric ecosystems are apparently fundamentally different in their construction. I don't know, maybe that's a load of horseshit. Anyway,
Perhaps.
But speaking of unique,
Yes.
and tying us back to the beginning, where we diverged a long time ago down a path of biogeography, and we're returning back to the name of the animal, which is Acrocanthosaurus, the high-spined lizard. And it's time to talk about the high spines.
This is true. So those spines, they're high.
All right, that's it.
Yeah.
That's it, they're big. What do you want from us?
Interesting. Yeah. Well, okay. So a few things about them. They're obviously not Spinosaurus here or something. But this was, to my knowledge, the first theropod. Well, no, Metrocanthosaurus would have come first. But that's only moderate spines.
What about
Altispinax,
Oh, right. Altispinax.
which is discussed in the paper that named Acrocanthosaurus.
Interesting. I actually have not read that paper in a
It's pretty
very
good.
long time.
This is pretty good.
But yeah, this is the first high-spined theropod from North America, I think. And it's the first one known from relatively good remains. But we're not getting to... It's not a sail like Spinosaurus.
No.
Like,
Is this why Spinosaurus was reconstructed as it was for a time?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so. There was a lot of speculation that Spinosaurus was like an evolutionary elaboration of what you see in Acrocanthosaurus.
That's cool.
Which is funny because the paper that describes Acrocanthosaurus is very clearly like, no, this is not at all like Spinosaurus.
That's
They-
interesting.
They described Acrocanthosaurus and they're like, yeah, there's Spinosaurus, which exists, and there's also Altispinax, and neither one of them seem to be particularly close to Acrocanthosaurus, which is probably just more closely related to Allosaurus.
Oh, so they were right.
And I was like, good job, you did it.
I am so envious of the period of this field where when you did your comparative description with other theropods, you had to read 3 papers.
I know, right? It's just brutalizing.
Well, the describers of Acrocanthosaurus did have to do the task of kind of untangling Altispinax from Megalosaurus.
Mhm.
And there's a cool little section where they go through, they're like, yeah, there was Megalosaurus, and then there were these spines that were found somewhere completely different, and they got referred to a different species of Megalosaurus, but that species was named for teeth, which aren't diagnostic, from a third location. And so, like, we advise restricting the name Altispinax just to the spines.
Good.
That's what we like to hear.
Dalton, never go to a third location.
And so the spines are kind of high. This is, I think, maybe the glaring thing about this model to me, is that
Yeah.
you can't really see the thing the animal is named
Gotta
for.
fucking squint. I think the giganotosaurus has a higher spot, the frontier one.
It might.
I mean, the
might.
movie one, I'm sorry.
But you can see that it's supposed to be there. And so it's weird in that the design does not really evoke the thing that the animal is famous for. But it might be more realistic, perhaps.
Well, do you think they're trying to go for more of a hump type situation? Because, like, I mean, in terms of how I've been envisioning Acrocanthosaurus, like, it is not like a sail.
Right.
But I do think it would be visibly thinner, at least at the top.
That would be my guess.
Is it
my
developed into a spinal table at all? I'm trying to look at vertebra and dorsal tooth.
My recollection is no.
Okay,
I don't think it does the spine table thing.
The spable.
A spine table viewer. So if you look at a vertebra in left lateral view, praise be to the left lateral view, there's the bottom part that articulates the centrum, the complex bit we call the neural arch, and then the neural spine, which comes off the top. And in some theropods, the neural spine is very narrow in most, but in some it kind of widens at the top, and that's what a spinal table.
So I'm looking. Oh, sorry.
That's
Go
no.
on. You finish your sentence. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Go for it, King.
Well, so I'm looking at a figure from the description of Acrocanthosaurus, and I'll put it in our chat, which is the neural spine of a dorsal vertebra. That does seem to be kind of expanded at the end.
Those rugosities and bumpity bumps might be for the interspinous ligaments.
That
They
was
are.
my guess.
I don't know if that's necessarily the expansion of the spine table. It's hard to tell in this
Yeah.
view.
No, eight. Oh, sorry. Did I only send the one view? Let me send the other view, which actually, if I had looked for more than 2 seconds, would realize, no, it's not expanded.
And you could also, if you go up and look at the third picture that I sent of the North Carolina one, it's kind of an oblique posterior angle. And they don't look to be... I don't know which of those are real, but none of them are expanded at the top.
Huh.
It's described in the paper that in the description of Acrocanthosaurus. Did I put this? Did I make a handy screenshot of this particular section? Yes, it is. So to quote the paper, to quote the description of Acrocanthosaurus, apparently in all, the spines were deeply embedded in a thick mass of muscle, similar in nature to the high withers of the recent bison. And the animals themselves must necessarily have differed somewhat in appearance from the more conventional genera in having a high, thick dorsal ridge. Such a condition is readily adapted to Acrocanthosaurus, the spines of which are massive and rugosely sculptured. The suggestions made in connection with the Permian Pelycosaurs, Edaphosaurus, and Dimetrodon that the spines might have supported a high, fin-like median ridge, or have even been separate spikes in the center of the back, are certainly unacceptable insofar as the present form is concerned.
But like that, unacceptable.
I like that too.
I heard your hypothesis. I deemed it unacceptable.
Unacceptable. Like the drawing is maybe a little silly, but the one from the reanalysis paper that I linked, the blue one, I think is kind of how I envision it generally.
You know what I almost never think about, and this kind of put in my brain?
What?
Like these spined animals as just these things being into like the old reconstructions of a Margosaurus, but these are all just individual spikes coming out of the back.
Oh, that'd be wild.
That'd be cool. I mean, in this case, they are unfortunately not.
No, I don't think so either. It's just like how little like you don't even kind of imagine that.
Right. Yeah, no, you don't. And one thing I just want to pick up on is you do have like that rugosity on the front and the back of the spine, so it's like a gnarly kind of rough texture. And so that's along the length of the spines in the dorsal vertebrae, so on the back. And so we could be reasonably certain that, like, at the very least, the vertebrae, the spinous processes of the vertebrae, the neural spines as we call them, are being joined to each other by really, really tough ligaments there. And this is interesting also because there's another group of large theropods that also do this.
Oh,
I know. So in tyrannosaurs, you also get really rough interspinous ligament scars. Might just be a thing that happens when you get large. The other thing I wanted to pick up on is that in the dorsal vertebrae, the interspinous ligaments seem to have spanned the entire length of the neural spine.
Explain what those are to the viewer.
So the interspinous ligaments are ligaments that hold the spines of the vertebrae together.
To the viewer.
A ligament is a band of tough connective tissue that joins bone to bone.
Good.
There we go. That's what a ligament is. And so I think it's probably right that these animals would have been like, this was probably going to look like an animal with a very tall, muscular back. Like, I think the idea of a bison hump is not a bad idea. I think in, like, pursuant to the model, though, the back should just be about twice as tall as it is, even if they don't change the shape.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like, it's just not the spines are not really in there. The other thing I wanted to pick up on is that the cervical vertebrae don't have interspinous ligaments that extended along the entire length of the neural spine. And so it's been described in the paper that Dalton so kindly sent me, so I can scoop him here, that
No, please do.
there's basically the bottom half of each spine has a big rugose attachment point for the ligaments, and then there's a smooth cup on the backside of each spine that seems to interlock with the spine of the next vertebra moving backward. And so I don't know where the suggestion that there's a locking mechanism actually started, but it was certainly recently repeated.
Are we propagating a paleo meme?
Well, I don't even know if it's a paleo meme. I mean, if they actually interlock together, I'd say that's probably what's going on.
I mean, it looks like they should.
That's kind of what I'm thinking.
This was an adaptation for preying specifically on sauropods. Folks, you might have seen a bit of a paleo meme repeated in the online spheres that, you know, megatheropods like carnosaurs, which Acrocanthosaurus is a member of, were specially adapted for preying on sauropods, whereas things like tyrannosaurs were specially adapted for preying on hadrosaurs or triceratops.
What?
We don't know this.
No, I missed what Alex said entirely. He cut out for me.
Did he say more things? I thought he just was silent, did a knowing silence.
That was knowing silence.
Oh no, I heard more than knowing science. Silence.
I was commenting on the paleo meme that giganotosaurs and large dinosaurs were specially adapted to prey on large sauropods, whereas tyrannosaurs were adapted to prey on hadrosaurs and ceratopsians and things like this. They had disparate. That I'm sure you're familiar with that.
I am. I'm familiar with that. Yes. Yeah.
This is
Thank you for clarifying.
Nothing more than a meme. Yeah. That's all I have to say about that. Don't stop repeating it. A giganotosaurus would probably do fine preying on a hadrosaur, and a tyrannosaurus would probably do fine preying on an inappropriately sized sauropod.
Yeah, I always wanted to say, what features? What features are you pointing at? What are the adaptations?
Is the ability for the Tyrannosaurus to atomize bone with its mouth going to not be as effective on an animal that's skeleton is like less densely constructed? What are you talking about?
Right, can't do it. Goes right through. It's like trying to take a picture of your like soup with an X-ray. It's too powerful.
Yeah.
I am going to be resigning my career as a science communicator in shape.
That was a beautiful word picture you painted in my mind.
Good word picture, Jesus Christ.
What? That's a phrase.
The integrity of our organization is declining.
Word picture is a phrase.
Dalton, come on.
No, it is.
I mean, I'm aware that a word picture, I know what you're communicating to me, but that's something a lunatic or a mad person would say.
No, it's you. Word picture from dictionary, according to Google, a vivid description in writing.
Uh-huh.
This is in dictionary. It's real. Oxford English Dictionary defines word picture as a cool thing normal people say. In this essay, I will be...
All right, I'm soapboxing for a moment while Dalton just spirals.
Watch it live.
Sometime, and many people do good work on this, and I don't want to paint with a large brush. But sometimes, ideas that are appropriately used or kind of diligently or kind of studied in a systematic and thorough way in ecology or extant organisms are sometimes perhaps misapplied or kind of maybe with a little enthusiasm, not necessarily to mislead, but people get excited because they read about something. And we'll try to do that with a fossil sample, fossil group. One of these things is the idea of niche partition, which is a real thing that happens in nature and in ecology and in an environment. And it certainly happened in prehistoric environments and paleo environments. Here's the problem, folks. It's twofold. One, as is often discussed in some paleospheres, the niches that people imagine are like insanely constrained in a way that they almost never are in like an actual environment. There's a lot like organisms have a niche or a niche. That's how I say it, however you say it. But there's flexibility. These are not like, you're nailed in necessarily. The other thing is, there's literally most fossil you remember an area where fossils are being deposited is a place where dead corpses are washing up or things are dying maybe nearby. It is not a pristine environment, and interpreting the relationships of organisms even within a single depositional environment can be really, really, really hard. That's all I wanted to say. Sometimes specific anatomical adaptations may let you, make a robust inference. Like this is eating a filter feeder that's eating little like crabs or shrimps, and this is a shellfish eater, and that's definitely real. But sometimes you might have multiple species of durophagous animals that are eating hard-shelled organisms. Thinking of some Triassic marine taxa, and maybe there needs partitioning. Maybe there's not pressure for resources. Who knows? I don't know, and we don't know. That's the end of my soapbox.
Well, I think there's one thing that I want to just add on to that, which is like you're right that usually the niches we imagine are too specific, but also the niches we imagine are almost too broad. Yeah. Like the niche is either like this was the thing that this kind of dinosaur, or it's like it was big predator. And I'm like, that's not a niche.
Yeah, good point.
Like the niche is not is over 1 metric ton.
Yeah. The way that like modern animals partition niches is something that is almost certainly mostly invisible to the fossil record.
Right.
Of like behavioral differences, eating
the
different
plants
times.
that grow on the west side of this one tree. Something insane like that.
Well, and I mean, there's also like it's related to an evolutionary bio like argument that I haven't seen any recent papers on, but I thought was very interesting as a student, because there's actually a contingent of researchers who say like there are more species alive right now than there have ever been, for the simple reason that, and I think this is a result of biases in the fossil record. I don't really entertain this too seriously, but I think the argument is interesting.
Okay.
Which is that like the more species there are, the more niches there are, because you can be a parasite on a species, and parasites are usually like their niche is usually they're a parasite on like one or a handful of other species. It's rare for a parasite to be equal opportunity. You can like exploit the interactions between other species. So like if you have a new kind of tree, that can create niches for all sorts of new bugs. That could create niches for all sorts of new predators of those bugs. Yada, yada, yada. And so the idea that they had is perhaps the number of species should just increase exponentially over time. And maybe some of the apparent depauperateness of the fossil record is not actually bias, but that some of it is there would have just been fewer species because there was less time for new species to create new niches. And while I don't agree with that, it's an interesting line of argumentation that I can't really argue with the... I can't argue with the concept. I can argue with the interpretation.
Well, I think you can... I think it's interesting. I do agree that as you add species, you increase complexity and have the potential for more niches. I think that fundamental basis is true, but like you might then just kind of from very, very loose principles be like, all right, well, let's take the times when almost all life got reset as restarting. Like theoretically, the end Mesozoic should have been more species rich than right now, because there's been more time that occurred since the prior last big mass extinction. Anyway,
the thing I think that we never dotted the I on is the whole lack of interspinous ligaments at some portion of the neural spines was recently suggested in a paper to be like a locking mechanism. And I'm sure you could make the argument that that's a specialization for predating on sauropods, but pursuant to Alex's point, I don't think that's really something you could test. But it does seem that these animals may have had an osteological, like what we call a bony stop, that would have prevented or would have stiffened their neck when it was in certain orientations.
Which is cool. And they do have a big head, so I don't know.
Yeah, although again, that's not a thing tyrannosaurs ever do.
Yeah, and also that model, that's a segue into something bad with the model.
Yes.
But before we do that, I'm going to do phylogeny because I need to wedge it somewhere.
Oh, right. I forgot about
we gotta
phylogeny.
I'm wedging it. This
Actually,
is the
the
dinosaur. Phylogeny is over. No, this is Acrocanthosaurus. It is a theropod dinosaur, and within theropods, it is part of it is an allosauroid, possibly, which is means possibly the same thing as carnosauria, depending on which phylogenetic interpretation you're partial to. But we're just going to discuss this as an allosauroid. So within allosauroids, we have Acrocanthosaurus, which we've already talked about, Acrocanthosaurus, things like allosaurus, and then the more derived kind of sister group to the allosauroids, the Carcharodontosauria. Saurians, pardon me. And we've looked at, I think, all of them but Acrocanthosaurus at this point, right? Have we done giganotosaurus? Yes, we did.
Yeah, we've done that.
So things like concavenator, which are very early members of the clade, and then things like giganotosaurus and Carcharodontosaurus, Meraxes, mapusaurus, which are these derived giganotosaurians in the case of giganotosaurus, and then other large terrestrial predators. But before we get to those, kind of in the middle, if you can imagine, between concavenator and those forms, we have Acrocanthosaurus, which is an early diverging Carcharodontosauriid, so within Carcharodontosauridae, the family. And it's showing kind of the acquisition of a number of those features related to big, but it is not as kind of weird as some of the later forms. That's all I got for it. It is from so it's from the northern hemisphere. I guess it's kind of interesting that most of the later ones from the Middle Cretaceous are largely from the southern hemisphere. I mean, they're probably getting down there by the early Cretaceous because by the later Cretaceous, continents are moving. It's probably harder to get around, and it appears that we are losing both groups by the end of the Middle Cretaceous, which is interesting. But yeah, I don't really have too much more to say in terms of Phylogenum on these guys. I don't know if anyone else. I mean, I guess because this is our last allosauroid, I think, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
No, we're going to talk about Astrolobinator, so I'm going to save the Neobinators and stuff like that for that.
Well, there is one thing I would like to say about them right now, just given some uncertainty. Well, I mean, the last evidence of any sort of Carcharodontosaurian in North America as a major predator is Siach.
And that's
of debated placement. It has been. It was initially interpreted as a Megaraptoran. It has been interpreted as a Tyrannosauroid, which I don't think is right. And the description of Alpcaracush, the Metrocanthosaurus that came out like a week too late to be in our Metrocanthosaurus video, the one from Kyrgyzstan, I think, right? Yeah, Kyrgyzstan. That description's analysis found it as a Carcharodontosaurian again. And I haven't really studied that material myself, but I don't disbelieve it. And so that is from basically dead on 100 million years ago, right at the beginning of right in this middle Cretaceous transition. And so that's kind of the last evidence you have of large allosauroids being major predators in North America. The Tyrannosaurs are, it's 100 million years ago. It's, or roughly, it's Mustn't Touch It member of the Cedar Mountain Formation. So this is an area I've dug, and this is like where Moros is from, which we'll talk about later in this series. So it's it paints a picture of there's a pretty definitive time point where things in North America change, and maybe things just don't change as strongly elsewhere. We don't really know. Yeah. It could be related to a giant ocean opening through the middle of the continent. That could, to quote the meme, this will have dramatic implications for the economy, or whatever.
This kills the Carcharodontosaurus. Must rank Acrocanthosaurus.
Yeah.
Yep.
Speaking of,
Something weird's happening with its leg.
Yeah, I don't like
it's
that.
called walking, Dalton.
Look at its femur.
Oh.
It
That
like
wasn't happening
dislocates.
in
God, it's
Oh.
like
Oh
Stop.
my god.
That,
Okay, I'm just gonna.
that wasn't happening in play, or maybe
I
we
didn't
didn't
notice it.
It's like the leg is rotating out in a way.
Yeah, why is that? I don't remember that happening, and I've been watching this thing for
Damn.
like.
It's jacked. Okay,
So
can
we're
we?
just gonna.
Oh, the spine's kind of there. We also
Let's do
didn't mention that the head is too wide. That it's kind of like a
What?
T-Rex box head.
yeah, but it's not the worst.
No, it's not.
No, it's not as wide as I remembered it.
No, it's not as bad as I thought. Like, the head's got something wonky to it, but
I can see the outline of the real skull in here, in left lateral view. As
for me, it's. I feel like the Acrocanthosaurus like skull, in my mind, has a pretty sharp downturn and is kind of round on top.
Yeah.
I feel like that's just because I always see it figured at kind of an incline. But maybe
No,
I'm. Maybe
I
I'm
would
tripping.
say that it is quite dorsally curved.
Which I wish this had, but it's not like I get it. Like I get it.
You get it.
It's not
it's
really a
almost
dorsal
at
curve
the-
so much, I think, Dalton. It's
But the
it's
mandible
that
has
the
this
lacrimal
huge-
crest is taller and kind of creates the illusion of a
I
bend.
see. Yes, I think you're right.
So, and
No,
I think
it's and this has like. This has the mandible is like has this huge
Yeah.
ventral expansion that's in this model.
That is there. Yeah. No, the mandible's not bad.
That's cool. I like that. Okay, I'm coming around on this. I think Scott's out of his mind, by the way.
What
Yeah.
So
I don't
here's-
remember what he
here's
gave
the first
it.
ranking. Scott says this is a C, which the only C I see in that is the crack he must be smoking.
That was a joke I was going to make the other week when you guys were giving C's to I forget which animal.
Ichthyosaurus.
Ichthyosaurus?
Yeah, Ichthyosaurus.
I gave Ichthyosaurus a B. I didn't give it a C.
I know, but other people gave it a C. You got barbecue chicken?
No, I got Haven, but I tried something different.
Oh, okay. I've become very hungry.
I got chicken and waffles. It's pretty good.
Ooh. Okay. But so Scott gives it a C. Does he elaborate on why?
Let me check the chat.
I thought you had it open, which is why.
I did, and then I ate my
He
chicken.
closed it in anger. It seems in your anger.
He says
Close the
it
chat.
No, wait.
has like nothing that I would want to see in an Acrocanthosaurus design, but it's not bad to look at as a design itself.
So, and Amelia, sorry, he says some stuff higher in the chat too. I'm Scott Johnson,
Well,
and I'm a stupid idiot. So I think he's clarifying his position.
Right.
There, he said that.
Yeah. Well, and he would be correct because C is ludicrous. It is not that bad. Like the
Jeez,
skull
who's next?
is a little boxy,
Anyway.
and the spine is not quite tall enough. But it doesn't matter for me because like I don't. It still looks good as an animal. Like as I was gonna give this a lower rank than I am, not as low as Scott. I was gonna give it a B because I was looking at it and I was like, oh, this is kind of lame. And then we saw all of the patterns and colors, and I was reminded, oh yeah, actually this one kicks ass. I like Acrocanthosaurus as a real animal a lot. Like it's one of my favorites, just because it's really unique and cool. So like I wish this had something more to it. Like I wish the face bothers me more than the spine. I don't care about the spine, but I wish that there was something more. Like the face was a little bit more elongate. I wish this one, like, I think it could do with, like, some fun, like, iguana spines or something. I think would help to, like, accentuate the spine, too, I think would be interesting. But they do a really, really good job with the colors. I didn't see a single one that I didn't like. And they're all different, too. Like, there's a lot of these speckly ones, but even the ones that aren't speckly have, like, little gloves and boots or, like, the little, like, black muzzle, which, like... That for me is top tier animal design, as I've said many times before. Like socks, muzzles, wonderful. And they do the good sit, like this one here. So I will give it an A for Acrocanthosaurus.
Very nice.
I am going to give it a B. But, like, I think I'm leaning more towards Scott's reasoning, but I think is being very harsh. It's just that the design doesn't to me, convey Acrocanthosaurus well enough, which is, I think, something I wouldn't be as harsh on if it weren't such a distinctive looking animal.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't give it a C, because normally I think if you fail to convey what animal it is, I think that's actually pretty bad as a design thing. Far worse than being inaccurate. What I do like about this actually has a lot of, I know I'm going to say verisimilitude again, but like it feels like an animal. Like,
Yeah.
it's just that I think if you showed me this design, I remember when it was revealed for, I think, Jurassic World Evolution 1, I didn't know what it was supposed to be until, like, I think it was a DLC animal in that game, and the trailer was like, this is
Yes.
Acrocanthosaurus. But at first I was like, okay, it's a carnosaur of some sort. The head shape is not quite right, like we were just talking about. There are details that are right, there are details that are not. The lacrimal crests aren't big enough, so it's got that kind of flat, a little bit too broad head. The arms aren't big enough, although Acro's arms are not huge, but the arms are like getting to T-Rex scale here.
Yeah.
So those are inaccurate things I don't like, but the most inaccurate thing that I don't like is just that it doesn't really have a tall spine. Like, that should give it a really cool, unique profile that they don't do here, and that feels like a big missed opportunity. And so for me, I love it. I love the patterns. I think it's actually very pretty and very nice, but it just it kind of lacks that oomph factor from being like clearly branded, I guess. So I'm going with a B.
Alex.
Sorry, I was reading something interesting.
More
Nothing
interesting
to be found here.
This one's tricky because I like how it looks, and it looks like a real animal to me. But it doesn't look a lot like Acrocanthosaurus. That being said, I find its outline and smoothness kind of pleasing. And I think I'm going to go with Amelia. I think this is a low A for me. I can sort of see where this is supposed to be Acrocanthosaurus. And it looks like it's a good carnosaur. It's not a good Acrocanthosaur, but it's good enough in the context of other designs and stuff we've ranked that I would say this is a low A. It's a, you know what you could say?
What could you say?
It's a southern A for Acrocanthosaurus, terror of the South.
You're so right. You could say that. I wouldn't, but you could. I've got to look at our tier list briefly. I've got to look at the list and see where we've got things. Because I'm curious. Let me see. I'm trying to see where we put the other Carcharodontosaurs. Because their showing in the game thus far has not been stellar, I'll say. Okay, so we've got the Jurassic World movie. The movie Giganotosaurus is in C tier, as is Carcharodontosaurus. And the Frontier Giganotosaurus is in A tier. That's tricky, because I think there's parts of this that I like more than the Frontier Giganotosaurus, and there's parts that I like less. Which is, James, I think you said it very well, which is this doesn't quite evoke Acrocanthosaurus enough for me. Like, I think it's a beautifully designed kind of generic, like, early Carcharodontosaur. And I really like it in the game. I think it's very pretty. I think it, like, except for what we just noticed with the leg, which I'm not going to hold against it, because I swear that was some kind of weird error, although it probably is happening in the game. We just didn't notice. I'm not going to hold that against it. I like pretty much everything about it. Scott mentioned, and it would behooves me to mention this because he's not here, that apparently in the first game it did a closed mouth vocalization. I did not notice it doing it in this one. That's fine. I'm not partial to that. And when it sits, there are certain color combinations, and I like a lot of the colors. There are certain color combinations that kind of give the illusion of a larger spine. Like this one here, where it transitions from kind of this dark color to the light color, kind of implies a shadow to there being some kind of a thinner top to the spine. I appreciate what they were trying to do with it, but I agree that it could have been more. And the head is just like not quite there. I actually had never really noticed the arms, and now that is kind of standing out to me too. I just hadn't looked at them, and that's too bad because I like Acrocanthosaurus. It's just a very cool animal. I really like it. and this doesn't quite hit all of the notes I would want it to, this would be like an excellent first draft design, like to receive if you're like, I want an Acrocanthosaurus art. I'm going to get it commissioned, or I want it for something, right? And you receive this. I'm like, this is an amazing like first go, and there'd just be a few things I would tweak, on the next pass. And so I don't think it's so low. I don't. It's I see the argument for putting it in C because it is not excelling at being Acrocanthosaurus. But I think it's so good just as a 3D model of a theropod. It looks really nice. That's it's like an A-level model in a C-tier reconstruction. And so I think that does, for me, balance out to B as well.
Okay, everybody. So there totally isn't a large time gap missing here. And so I'm just going to ask for clarification. We gave this a C, a B, an A, and a B, right?
Yes, sirree, bad.
I think that must make it a low B.
I think it makes it like a mid B.
I think it's a mid B,
Yeah, a low B.
Well, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, mid B. I'm sorry. I was thinking it was 2 C's and a B, not 2 B's and a C.
No.
Okay. Yeah, well, in that case, we're going to put Acrocanthosaurus as a mid B. Are we going to put this above or below Tarbosaurus?
I'd put it above Tarbosaurus.
Above Tarbosaurus?
Yeah.
Okay. And there we go. It's a B.
Yippee!
But now, are you guys ready?
Oh,
do you know what time it is?
Wait, is it time to spin the wheel? Because I'm not ready, even though we have had an enormous amount of time for me to be ready for this.
It's time to spin the wheel, and the wheel is looking sparse.
Good.
Do you see this?
No.
I can estimate how many months that is by looking at it for us, and I don't like it.
You can.
We're going to be out of content soon.
Many things frighten me.
All right.
It's almost 4 months.
Very impressive.
Are we ready?
Good job, everybody.
Ready?
I think we're ready.
Time to spin the wheel?
Time to spin.
Most of these are fun. Will be fun to talk about.
That.
Whale.
Wheel.
Round and round and round it goes. Where will it end? Nobody knows.
Back to the water?
Back to the water.
Back to the water. Hey,
I thought we already did this. I could have sworn we already did this. Okay. Well, so our patrons do an amazing service for the Skeleton Crew because there's just no way we'd really be able to keep doing this if it weren't for the support that we get from you guys. So I want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you all very much.
Yes.
As of this recording, our patrons at Gorgosaurus tier and higher are Benjamin Seepser, nickname Philip Fico, Christopher Bellis Jones, Aaron Anderson, Adamolos, Black Spectral Pig, Black Light Virus, Camphibia, Chaotic Kaiju, Dano Kairos, Dino Dom, Kevin Preem, King Zashu, Life Finds a Way, Max Ironpaw, Pythonic, Ryan Wants to Die, Swamp Ape Science, Wanderer, and Wheat. So thank you all so much for your support. It means a lot to us. It means the world to us, really, that you think that what we do is valuable enough that you want to support us financially. If you like our videos, but don't like our videos, so to speak, you can show your support by just leaving a comment on the video or giving it a like. And, of course, subscribing to the Skeleton Crew if you haven't already. And, of course, going to our Etsy page and buying one of everything that we manufacture. Maybe two. Any number. The holidays are coming up, and I need to buy Christmas gifts to my family. So you should buy Christmas gifts for yours.
Unspeak these words.
What? Unspeak the words. The holidays are coming up.
Yes,
they're coming up.
Bit of despair.
I know. The passage of time.
Also, this video will almost not come out in October. Thank you very much, and thank you to all of our patrons. We will see you next time when we go back to the water.